All right, so you know how sometimes you just can't help but think about those mind-bending ideas, like time travel? Today we're going to tackle one of the most famous ones, the grandfather paradox. We'll use our sources to really unpack this thought experiment and see why it's so fascinating.
Yeah, this one always gets people talking. The basic idea is pretty simple, right? You go back in time and stop your grandparents from ever meeting.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Exactly. You succeed in your mission, your parents are never born, and neither are you. Which then begs the question.
How could you have gone back in time in the first place? It's like a snake eating its own tail. It just doesn't make sense.
That's exactly why it's a paradox. And our sources point out that this isn't just some fun brain teaser, it actually exposes some potential cracks in our understanding of how the universe works.
So it's deeper than it seems on the surface. What exactly does it challenge?
Well, for one thing, it messes with our idea of causality. We generally think of causes happening before effects, but time travel, at least in this scenario, kind of flips that on its head.
So by preventing your grandparents from meeting, the effect, you not being born, is what prevents the cause, their meeting.
Precisely. It's like time is flowing backwards in a way.
That's just wild. But isn't there another fundamental principle that this paradox messes with?
You're thinking of the principle of non-contradiction, right?
Right, that something can't be both true and false at the same time. But in this paradox, you both exist to go back in time and don't exist because you stopped yourself from being born.
You got it. It's a straight up logical contradiction. And then there's the age-old debate about free will versus determinism.
If time travel were possible, would you really have the freedom to change the past? Or is the universe going to somehow prevent you from messing things up?
It's a big question. Maybe your attempts to change things are actually what guarantee the timeline stays consistent. Like it's all predetermined.
Okay, so lots of heady stuff here.
Right.
But our sources suggest that the paradox might actually tell us more about how we think than about time travel itself.
Yeah, our brains are kind of wired to see time in a linear way, always moving forward.
It's like a straight line from past to present to future, right?
Exactly. And that makes total sense for our everyday lives. But maybe that's not the only way to think about time.
So if time isn't just this rigid line, our ideas of before and after get a little fuzzy, which might explain why the paradox seems so impossible.
It's a really intriguing possibility. Our sources also mention the idea of the universe enforcing self-consistency.
What does that mean?
Well, it's often attributed to a physicist named Igor Novikov, and it basically says that any journey back in time would have to be part of the timeline from the very beginning.
So even if you try to change something, it was always going to happen that way.
In a sense, yeah. Your actions are already woven into the fabric of history.
So even with time travel, there might be limits on what we can actually change. Almost like there are rules to the game, even if we don't know them yet.
It definitely raises questions about how much agency we would truly have in the past.
Okay, so we've got causality, logic, free will, and now this self-consistency thing. But there's one more layer to this paradox, right?
You're thinking about the existential aspect.
Right, the idea that the grandfather paradox isn't just about time travel. It's also a reflection of our own relationship with the past.
It highlights how we can't change where we come from, how our origins shape who we are. Like, you can't erase your family history, and the paradox emphasizes that connection.
And even without time travel, our past defines us in ways we may not even realize. It's like our personal histories are set in stone, for better or worse.
So think about your own life. What seemingly small events from your past have actually had a huge impact on who you are today? Events you can't undo, but that have shaped your path in unexpected ways.
Wow, that's a really powerful thought. And it kind of brings things full circle.
Yeah.
This deep dive into the grandfather paradox really shows that it's not just about the nuts and bolts of time travel.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about how we think about time itself, about cause and effect, about our own place in the grand scheme of things. It forces us to confront our linear way of thinking.
I think that's a great takeaway. And it leaves you with a really interesting question to ponder.
Yeah.
How do the unchangeable events of your past, all those little choices and circumstances, continue to influence who you are right now and who you'll become in the future? It's kind of like your own personal grandfather paradox. You don't need a time machine to see how your past is constantly shaping your present.
So much to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the grandfather paradox. Until next time, keep exploring those mind-bending ideas.
Absolutely. Always fun to challenge our